Go
Dave,
ahead.
I'm sorry. It is our pleasure to have you here, but let me just give a brief of introduction about you to our audience. So you are actually being watched by more than 15,000 Indonesian audience now.
Wow. Wow. Now I'm nervous. Now I'm
Right.
nervous.
So you can see the enthusiasm and excitement of Indonesian audience in watching your lecture today. But let me give you a brief of introduction about you. So, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Dave Ulrich, University professor, author, speaker, management coach, and consultant. Mr. Ulrich is a professor of business at the University of Michigan and co-founder of the RBL Group. He has written over 200 articles and 30 books that have shaped the HR profession, defined organization as capabilities, and shown the impact of leadership on customers and also investors. And he teaches how can leaders create value. This is so important for us, how leaders create value.
And if somebody on the technical side could make sure I'm not hearing the translator because it's translating in my communication. So
Let me sort
what
this
a
out first, Dave. Teman-teman,
okay.
ada translasi yang dia dengar dulu, translasi bahasa Indonesianya, sehingga Dave tidak mendengar translasi bahasa itu. Dave, I'm so sorry for the technicalities, but please, the time is yours, Dave.
Okay, thank you so much. What a privilege. I wish I was able to be with you in Indonesia because I've been to Indonesia a number of times and have such a delightful experience each time that I go. Again, if they could make sure the translator voice is not in my headset because it makes it very difficult. But I am so privileged. I come to you from the United States. Welcome to my office. This is where I work and this is where I live, and I'm just privileged to join you today. I'm going to talk about the changing world in which we live and how we need to begin to manage in that changing world, especially how we begin to build leadership in the changing world with a focus on the implications for the Indonesia's future leaders. So I'm going to try to give you some tools about leadership and what leadership looks like in this changing world. I appreciate human resource professionals, and I hope each of you will walk away with some ideas that you can use. Let me start with the setting in which we live in Indonesia or anywhere else in the world. The setting is changing. It's changing dramatically. I'm going to use a term called now is the time. Now is the time in today's business context for us as human capital people and leaders to move forward. Why? The context is the kingdom. It's the setting in which we live, in which we work. We see that context with the COVID pandemic affecting everyone in the world. We see it in Indonesia with an increasing percent of women in the workforce in age, where Indonesia will have a demographic premium in the next number of years. An emotional deficit as we've all struggled with the pandemic and mental health, and finally in technology. The technology that brings us together with a minor glitch at the beginning, but an incredible technology that lets me connect with you wherever you are in Indonesia. That context is the kingdom. It's the setting in which we live. The content is the king or the queen. It's the activities that we have to do. That content, not for HR professionals, but for business leaders, is changing the future of work. I'll start at the top left. Increasingly, the value of your organization is not just your cash flow or your tangible asset, but your intangible asset, your people, your organization. In the United States, and I'm sure Indonesia and other countries are doing the same, the SEC, as Securities Exchange Commission, is requiring as a government agency that a company report their human capital because investors want to know not only their profit and financial performance, but their human capital. There's a group of business executives from around the world called the Business Roundtable talking about profit and purpose, or profit and people. ESG, environment, social governance is getting attention. A group in Europe, ISO 30414, is looking at measuring human capital. At the bottom, the World Economic Forum, an annual meeting in Switzerland, is now talking about human capital. And all the way around on the left, the National Academy of Corporate Directors, Association of Corporate Directors, is talking about culture. All of those issues are related to the future of work. And I call that human capability. Human capability is the set of things we need to know and do that help us respond to the intangible value, to the business rules, to the roundtable, to culture. Now is the time, or now more than ever. Human capability is something our business leaders are paying attention to. So, in this Human Capital Summit, we need to build human capability. And the language in this area is sometimes confusing. In this summit for the next 2 days, you're going to try to do a number of things that will help you rethink, reinvest, and reinvent human capability, to rethink human capability, to reinvest human capability, to reinvent it. We've discovered that human capability is composed of 4 things. Now, I'm going to do something somewhat silly, and you don't need to do what I do. If you're in a group with people, you could do this. Human capability are my fingers. That's the talent. That's the competence, the workforce, the people, or human capital. But human capability is not just the human, my fingers, it's the capability, the workforce, the workplace, not the workforce, but the workplace, and the processes, not just the people. They come together in leadership. And leadership combines talent, organization, and leadership. I know in China that when you greet somebody of respect, you put your fist in your hand and it's a sign of respect. That's leadership. And all of that is supported by my forearms, the HR services that we offer. So in this conference, you are going to receive information about talent, organization, leadership, and HR. Somebody told me a few weeks ago, we could do the human capability cheer, talent, organization, leadership, and HR, and then go like that. By the way, I will not make you go like that, the translator or anyone else, but that's what we bring. When we are involved as a human resource professional, we bring to the dialogue and the business discussion talent, organization, leadership, and HR, and we make that work. Now, why do I lay that out? I'm going to spend my time for the next 40 minutes talking about leadership. And how do we make sure that we have the right leadership? How do we make sure that we as HR professionals can bring the right leadership that combines talent and organization to leadership to be effective? How do we reinvent it? How do we reinvest it? How do we reimagine it? And how do we rethink, reinvent, and reinvest and reinvent our leadership to be effective? Especially, may I emphasize again, especially in the Indonesian world, with women in the workforce, with a new generation. What does leadership look like in that new world? And that's what we're going to talk about. My colleagues and I have been involved in the study of leadership. We all have ideas that we use. We have been involved in writing some books about a very simple formula in the middle. Effective leadership or results-based leadership is a set of attributes. I'm going to talk about 5 attributes called the leadership code and what they look like today, times stakeholder results. Your job, or the job we have in HR, is to create leaders who build customer results. We have a book, Leadership Brand. Will leaders drive the brand of our company? Employees. We have ideas on why employees matter, the why of work. Will leaders drive the organization? Victory through organization and leadership capital. Will leaders drive investors? Our formula is very simple. Effective leadership is a set of attributes, and I'm going to talk about 5 domains and 10 attributes that deliver a set of results that get sustained and get implemented. And we did a book called Leadership Sustainability. That basic formula is the mental model I hope you walk away with. How do I, as an HR professional, provide effective leadership with the attributes times the results that get implemented? And you notice on the left, my colleagues and I have had a real privilege of working in Asia, doing a book called Asian Leadership, Leadership in Asia,
juga pengalaman bekerja di Asia, dan juga ada beberapa hal yang kami publikasikan di sana, dan juga ada mengenai kepemimpinan dalam konteks Asia seperti Indonesia, Malaysia, dan Singapura, dan lain-lain. Dan di dalam logika itu, kita melihat bahwa ada tantangan-tantangan pada saat kita ingin membuat suatu kepemimpinan yang lebih efektif di dalam perusahaan Anda. Bagaimana kita memahami bahwa kepemimpinan itu penting sebagai HR professionals pada saat saya masuk ke dalam pertemuan bisnis, apapun diskusi bisnis yang saya hadiri, saya harus memiliki 5 talent dan juga fist saya, dan juga leadership. Dan leadership adalah kombinasi dari dari dua aspek ini, dan sangat penting role-nya. Dan effective leaders adalah 20% waktunya itu mencoba membangun pemimpin-pemimpin di masa mendatang. Jadi yang kedua adalah yang diperlukan apa saja dari leadership di Indonesia, misalnya dengan demografi dan perubahannya terkait dengan gender dan umur, apa yang harus kita lakukan sehingga nanti kita memastikan akan ada kepemimpinan di masa mendatang. Dan yang berwarna ungu itu adalah yang menjadi topik dari pembicaraan saya, dan ini adalah mengenai effective leadership. Ada 5 domain dan 11 skills. Dan yang terakhir adalah bagaimana apa yang harus saya lakukan sebagai HR professional untuk menciptakan kepemimpinan yang lebih baik. Saya berharap nantinya Anda bisa memahami mengenai semua hal ini. Jadi saya akan mulai dengan yang pertama. Saya akan bertanya kepada Anda, dan kalau Anda bersama dengan orang-orang lain, atau Anda boleh saja menuliskan sesuatu atau chatting dengan 15.000 orang lainnya. Saya kira saya bicara dengan banyak sekali orang sekarang. Tapi tanyakan hal ini. Kalau kita memiliki better leadership atau kepemimpinan yang lebih baik di dalam organisasi saya, apa yang akan terjadi? Apa yang akan terjadi? Ya, karena misalnya pemimpin kita lebih baik, kita kemudian mempertanyakan apa sih yang berbeda dengan pemimpin kita ini misalnya. Nah, saya akan sampaikan apa yang kita lihat di dunia di bawah garis merah, di bawah adalah yang terjadi di dalam satu perusahaan secara internal. Dan pemimpinan yang baik itu membuat pekerjanya menjadi lebih produktif, dan kemudian mereka bisa menjadi lebih baik, dan kita bisa melihat bahwa ada hal-hal yang baik terjadi kepada pekerja pada saat kita memiliki kepemimpinan yang baik. Dan ada hal-hal strategis di bawah garis merah itu. Pada saat kita berpikir mengenai ini, kalau ada pemimpin yang baik, apa yang akan terjadi? Semuanya itu terjadi di bawah garis ini. Tapi saya juga mau bicara mengenai apa yang ada di atas garis merah itu. Effective leadership itu membantu juga customer, sehingga kita membangun pemimpin-pemimpin di dalam perusahaan kita, sehingga customer kita akan memiliki pengalaman yang lebih baik. Brand kita akan menjadi lebih baik. Saya ingin membangun satu identitas yang baik di dalam marketplace. Dan
So in some companies, when they do their advertising, either the print or media or social media, the advertising messages become part of what leaders are trained to do. So, excuse me, if a company promises innovation, we train innovation in our leadership training. Above the line, investors. Leaders help create market value. One, that could be lower cost of capital when we borrow money, or higher market value when we sell stock. Leaders create value for the investors. We did a book called Leadership Capital Index, where we showed that leaders can create 20 to 30% of a firm's market value. Leaders create reputational value in the community. Throughout Indonesia, reputation matters. And finally, they create partnership or collaborative value. So if you're a leader, or if you're in HR creating leadership, recognize the value you create for everybody. We call that leadership outside in. If you're a leader, your job is to create value for the employees, for the strategy, for line managers, but also for the customers, the investors, the communities, and the partners. And if you can create leadership for all of those stakeholders, you're more likely to be effective. Leadership matters. I mentioned earlier that I'm talking to the Human Capital Summit, but I know there may be business leaders here. Your job as a business leader is to build the next generation of leadership. Your job is to manage succession, that you replace yourself with somebody better than you. When I grew up, my father, and I think I'm at home. Oh, I get to show pictures because I'm at home. My children made a book, and I'm not sure if you can see this book. This is my father, and it's a book for my grandchildren. It's your great grandpa Ulrich, and it's about my father and his life. You see a picture behind me. He used to pick up food from stores and take it to those in need in his truck. My father taught me a lesson. He said, never leave a place worse than you found it. My father built campgrounds where people would camp, and we always had to clean the campground. Never leave it worse than you found it. Leader succession. If you're a leader or a human resource professional building leadership, leave the next generation better. So what's required to do succession? Succession planning is so critical. Succession planning means we build the next generation. As a parent, I hope I've helped my children become better than me. As a leader, I hope the next generation is better. Many of you have done succession planning systems where you have a chart and you say, here's the backup person, here's what that person, and here's the person who's next in line for this job. I believe that's not the place to start. If I want to build leader succession, I start with the requirements of the position. I start with the changing requirements, and then I see the qualities of the candidate, including DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I encourage you at any level in your organization, from the CEO to the vice president, to the director, to the manager, to have this discussion. And I love the tools. It's about a 3-hour discussion. Type of competence, technical, cell 1 for 10 minutes. What are we good at today technically? We're good at marketing. We're good at manufacturing. We're good at digital. We're good at supply chain. Cell 2, what are we good at socially? How do we manage information, take care of people? Cell 3 might take about 30 minutes. What's the challenges ahead? What's going to happen to my company in oil, in gas, in tourism, in lodging, in banking, in communications? What's going to be our strategy? Where are we going to play? How are we going to win? Who are our customers and what will they want from us? Cell 1 tells me what we're good at technically, cell 2 socially, and cell 3, here's the challenges. They now become filters for cell 4 and 5. Given those challenges, cell 4, probably 30 minutes. What do we need to improve technically? We need to be better at global arbitration. We need to be better at supply chain. We need to be better at digital. Cell 5, what do we need to improve socially? Cell 5, we need to manage information, manage differences, manage people. Cell 4 and cell 5 tell me the requirements of the position. Leadership succession starts not with the person who's next in line, but what will this position require? And once we do this exercise, we can begin to identify the requirements necessary for that leader. And then we create our candidate pool. Given Indonesia's demographics, with women in the workforce, with a younger workforce and an incredible demographic boom, we need to build a candidate pool that has diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity means we put people in leadership positions who have divergent thinking. We source candidates who think and act differently based on the future. This could be women, it could be minorities, it could be younger people. We need as leaders to make sure that our successors are not like us, but different from us because they need the skills for the future. That's divergent thinking. We want to source and find candidates who have new ideas and make the place comfortable for gender and diversity and new next generation. On the right-hand side, we want to be inclusive. We want to create a sense of belonging. We want to come together. When people who are divergent with diversity come together and are convergent, great things happen. And in the middle, we want to create equity. Equity is about opportunity. We want to give everyone an opportunity to learn and to grow. In Indonesia, a great country with great organizations, both in public sector and private sector, We need to make sure that as we build our succession, we focus on the requirements of the position. What will the position require going forward? And then we create a diversity, equity, and inclusion candidate pool that will respond to the increasing number of women and next generation employees. Leader's job is to replace yourself with somebody as good or better than you who has the skills for the future, not the past. What that means in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is we've got to create that candidate pool. We've got to create a pool of candidates who have ideas that are different from ours. How do we do that? Over the last number of years around the world, in Asia, in Europe, in North America, diversity is focused, number one, on affirmative action. We track the numbers, the number of women in positions, the number of different candidates. Then we have activities, policies, and programs. Then we have strategy. We make sure that we understand that diverse leadership helps us deliver our goals. But to have sustainable diversity for succession, we need to change our assumptions. There's two assumptions that I encourage you as leaders or as human resource professionals, build an assumption in your organization that we are not here to focus on power, but to empower. Power is about action and what you do. When you look at an employee, what do they do? Empower is about their human potential. DEI focuses on potential, not action. Power allocates resources. You're a winner, you're a loser. When you empower someone, you create additional resources. Power focuses on evidence, your status, your title, your actions. Empower focuses on your beliefs, about everyone, your beliefs. Power is about today. Tomorrow's empowerment is about tomorrow's opportunity. Power is about my agenda. Empowerment is about another person's agenda. Power is about what I want. I'm going to force you to do something. Empowerment is to help you do what you want. Our job as leaders in creating the next generation of succession planning is to empower, is to have an assumption of empowerment. And number two, the assumption is that everyone has something to offer. In the past, we would say, I have a role. Here's my role in the organization. Here's what I do. Here's what I know. Then we'd say, I'm connected to each other. Now what I've got to say is everyone has something to offer. And if we're going to work with women and next generation employees, how do we make sure that they come to the organization able to succeed? Okay, I've just talked about why that's so critical in Indonesia. Your demographics are changing. You've got women increasingly in the workforce. You've got a younger generation as that bulge moves up. Are we as leaders and as human capital professionals creating opportunities for women and next generation leaders? That will be a key to our leadership succession. Are we giving people opportunities to make progress in the future? The requirements of the position focus on what tomorrow needs, and the qualities of the candidate focus on the sustainability assumptions. So now I come to the bulk of my talk, and I've already covered a lot. In the new world that we live in, we have to build human capability, which is leadership, talent, organization, and leadership. Leadership matters. We should be spending 20 to 25% of leaders' time building the next generation. And succession requires new assumptions because of women and next generation about empowerment, and everyone has something to offer. So now in purple, one of the key messages, and I'll do these pretty quickly. You can get copies of these on LinkedIn. I posted them. What will a leader of the future need to know and do? I love to give you a little simple exercise. And again, I wish I could go into chat or you could write it down by yourself for about 20 or 30 seconds. Given my experience, what are 5 to 7 things that a leader should know and do? Given the world of the future, what should a leader know and do? It's a very interesting question, and I'm going to talk while you think about that. Let me get a quick drink. If I'm a leader, what do I need to learn to do better? What makes me effective? If I'm building leadership as a human resource professional, what can I do to help make sure leaders have the right skills? We've studied that question. We've written a book called Leadership Code. We wrote this book about 12 years ago. We said there's 5 fundamental things that leaders should know and do. See if what you wrote down matches these 5 things. Top right, strategy. As a leader, you shape the future. You define where we're going. You set a vision, a mission, direction, goals, objectives. You help us succeed in a marketplace. Bottom right, you execute. You get things done. You make change happen. You build teams. You accomplish. You hold people accountable. Bottom left, you manage your people today. You manage your talent. You make sure your people have the competence and commitment and skills for the future. Top left, you're a human capital developer. You build the next generation. By following those assumptions, you empower others. You recognize that everyone has something to offer. And in the middle, you invest in yourself. You have personal proficiency. You have the personal qualities of integrity that helps you succeed. By the way, those 5 items are pretty standard. If your company has a leadership competency model, compare them against those 5. I was in a company recently. They compared their model. Most of what they were focusing on was strategy. You've got to do all 5. Another company focused on personal proficiency. The other thing we learn is that leaders have an intuitive native sense. They have what's called a predisposition. Predisposition is like the Meyer test that says if you're an introvert or an extrovert. I tend to be an introvert. That's my predisposition. So for me, sitting at home is nice, although I wish I could be with you. To have to do extroverted things and speak to 15,000 people, you frighten me with that. I've got to learn how to do it. Likewise in leadership, when you listed the things that you think leaders need to know and do, find out your predisposition. What were most of your items focused on? Strategy, goals, directions, objectives, out where we're headed, execution, getting things done, making things happen, holding accountable, talent, communication, sharing with people, building my people, caring about my people, empathy, human capital, empowering my people, building a culture of the future, personal, integrity, trust, authenticity. What's your predisposition? You have them. Learn to do the other. I've had to learn to be more of an extrovert as I've done these sessions. I'm going to give you a quick exercise and I'm going to ask you for about 45 seconds. How many of these items can you count in a row? 1, top left, 2 in the middle, 3, 4, 5, 6, 45 seconds. How many of these items can you count in a row? I'll not talk so that you can look at the items. It's a difficult exercise. They're big, they're small, they're sideways. It's hard to find. Sometimes in the 45 seconds, people find 15 or 20. I'm going to ask you to do it again, only this time I put 4 lines in the grid. Across the top, 1, 2, 3, in the middle, 4, 5, 6, along the bottom, 7, 8, 9. That grid gives me a framework. It gives me a way to organize what's complicated. This grid that I've just shared is a framework for thinking about leadership. It's a way to think about what leadership is and what leaders should do. Strategist, executor, talent manager, human capital, and personal. You now have a framework. You have a code, a distinction of what leadership looks like. Now, what I'm going to do quite quickly, and you won't remember all of these, is talk about 2 items in each of the 5 that seem to be merging in today's world. Strategist, this is a bad example. Look at the stoplight with no direction. Today in the world you live in, and if I'm taking notes, you may want to just make a note. I need to get better at that. Information asymmetry. I need to figure out what's the information that I have to gather to be successful. How do I set strategic priorities? And 2, I need to harness uncertainty. I need to be able to live with uncertainty. Don't tolerate it. Don't manage it. Find in uncertainty opportunities. Somebody once said to me, under pressure, Some rocks become dust because they break apart. Other rocks become diamonds. So in strategy, I shape the future. Am I getting information that separates me and that separates signals from noise so I know a priority? Am I harnessing uncertainty? Executors get things done. Do I make things happen? This is an example of execution. I apologize for those that don't like dogs or don't like alcohol, but the dogs and the cats come together to accomplish the prize. They get things done. In today's world, we need to be a strategist. We've talked about that, information and uncertainty. To be a good executor, you've got to create a culture. You've got to create a culture. And the culture has got to be outside in. It's not just your values, it's the value of your values for others. And so when I create a culture, I want to make sure that my culture creates value for those that I'm serving. I'll give a very quick example. Our son, I'm going to show pictures. Our son, this is my mother, her son, that's me, our son, and his son. He finished his PhD and wanted a gift. So we said to our son, what would you like? And he said, I would like to go to Disney World. So soon, 16 of us showed up in Disney World. Notice we had 8 children, 8 adults. We showed up in Disney World for 3 days, 4 days actually, and 3 nights. My kids were so excited. My son and our 2 daughters and their kids. I was not excited because it was very expensive. And the woman who took this picture said, oh, what a lovely family. If you've ever been to Disney World, this is the happiest place on earth. And I said, not for me, because it's very expensive. And I'm not going to be able to buy a car because we're going to Disney World for 3 nights. A day or 2 later, we walked in and we saw a princess. And this is I think our granddaughter. And we saw 2 princesses. We saw another one. This is our grandchildren. And when we saw the Disney princesses, our grandchildren stopped and they stared and they said, Grandpa, she's real and she's beautiful. Grandpa, we love you. Thank you. By the way, many of us as parents say, oh, that touches my heart. We love you from our grandchildren or our children. I didn't say that. I said, oh, this is terrible. We're going to have to go to Disney again. And now we're going to do a Disney cruise where we spend more money and I still don't get to buy a car. This year, we celebrate Christmas in our family. And in December, when the children are out of school, we're going back again to Disney. Now, why do I share that story? Look at number 3. Disney has created the right culture. They've created a culture that makes sure that the princes they bring in and the princess they have who serves those children is the right one because it's the value of the values for a customer. Number 4, so when you're a leader, create a culture. It's not the roots of the tree, it's the leaves of the tree. Number 4, provide guidance. Improve decision-making. As a leader, there's a lot of things you should do. Learn how to provide guidance about the most important things, the priorities. We've done strategy, we've done execution, talent. Am I, as a leader, taking care of my people today? This is a great example of very bad talent. It's obviously not in Indonesia. It's, I don't know where it is, but notice the picture. These contractors are installing steel pillars in concrete to stop the vehicles from parking on the pavement outside of their bar. They're now in the process of loading up the truck and getting ready to go home. Notice they're going to have trouble getting the truck over the bars. This is not good talent. My job with talent is really fairly simple. Oops, let me go back up. My job with talent is to make sure that I'm sorry, I did that twice, is to personalize the employee relationship. Going forward, what can I as a leader do for that employee very specifically? And can I create great talent practices? This conference and other conferences by this Human Capital Summit and others in Indonesia can tell you the practices in hiring, training, compensation, retention, engagement, manage for today. And finally, human capital. We talked about succession and the need to build succession with diversity. Am I building the next generation? Focused outside in. The hands represent the customer, the marketplace, the conditions, the context. The child represents the next generation leader. The dog supporting the child represent HR, IT, finance, and the dog standing is the consultant. I say that as a joke. Human capital. Do you empower others? Do you do a job as a leader to make others better? I think one of my great tests of leadership is when somebody leaves an interaction with you, do they feel better or worse about themselves? If it's good news, it's easy to feel better. Congratulations, you were successful. But even in bad news, do you feel better about yourself? And number 8, do you form long-term relationships? Do you create a place of belonging by connecting and supporting and helping the next generation? One of the great questions I like leaders to ask is, what do you think? How would you approach that? I'm almost done with the model. We have strategy. Let me just summarize. Where are we going? What's the future? Do we have information that tells us? Do we harness the uncertainty? Number 3, do we create the right organization, the right culture? Number 4, do we get guidance so we make the right decisions? Number 5, do we have a personal relationship with empathy and emotion? Number 6, do we create the right talent practices for bringing people in, training, development, moving them out, and engagement? Number 7, do we empower the next generation with those skills of empowerment? And do we build a sense of belonging and a sense of relationships? And perhaps most critical, do we have personal proficiency? Do we invest in ourselves, our character, our integrity? I didn't know who all to put on this chart at the top left. You may not know Sheikh Zayed. Many of you do. One of the great leaders. Mother Teresa. In the United States, Martin Luther King, a pope, the African leader Mandela, Gandhi. I was going to put up some Indonesian leaders, but I didn't want to get in trouble politically with anyone. I have Martin Luther King's picture in my office as one of the great iconic leaders. What do these leaders do? What do they do personally to be successful? And we have found 3 things. The one I'm going to talk about briefly is navigating paradox. They navigate the tension of long-term, short-term, caring for people, building competitiveness. They navigate the tension of top-down and bottom-up. They learn. Are you a learner? When you see a problem or a failure, do you constantly learn? Jonas Salk, the creator of the polio vaccine, and boy, do I hope we have scientists today with COVID. Somebody said, what made you successful as a scientist? And he said, I came home from school as a young boy. I had a glass of milk. I put it near the edge of the table. My mother said, don't do that. I did it again. Don't do that. Don't do that. Ultimately, I put the glass on the edge of the table and it fell. And the milk spilled. My mother looked at me and said, Jonas, what did you learn? What did you learn? Failure is an opportunity to learn. And number 11, I had 10 plus this one. Are you as a leader taking care of yourself? Perhaps the most critical skill of all of the 5 areas and 10 skills, taking care of yourself. When I have the privilege of coaching leaders, I always end with the question, are you taking care of yourself? That's it. That's the model of leadership. That's what we see leaders needing to understand and do. That taking care of yourself is so critical. I'm going to just highlight it briefly because I want everyone here, either as a human capital professional, to take care of yourself and take care of others, or as a leader. The demands on you are high. I started this session this morning by talking about the context in which we live, COVID, new demographics, emotional stress, technology, social issues. Those demands are high. If we don't have resources, at the top left, we burn out. We need to stay in balance. How do you take care of yourself? We've discovered 5 things. Physical resource, diet, nutrition, exercise, space. I find my office space a comfortable place for me to live and work. I try to eat healthy. I try to exercise. I don't eat as healthy as I probably should, but I try. Are you, as a leader, taking care of your physical self? Are you developing your intellectual agility? Are you curious by coming to things like this Human Capital Summit? Are you learning? Are you running into your mistakes? Are you creating emotional reserves? Are you creating an ability to manage the challenges of our time with loneliness, with anxiety, with depression, with fear? Run into them. Do you have a great social network? Do you have a friend at work? And do you have a friend not at work where you have a relationship and work well? And finally, do you have a spiritual foundation? This is not about a religion. It's about a belief in meaning and purpose that may be part of religion or may be part of your value system. Those resources are high, will allow me to cope with those high demands. That's it. That's my leadership summary for the post-pandemic. Strategist, executor, talent manager, human capital developer, and personal proficiency. You can follow me on LinkedIn, get a list of those. If you glance down those 11 items, I hope you see a skill that you could develop. I hope you see a skill that your organization could use so that you could be more effective. Again, I wish we had time to do a poll. Which of these 10 or 11 skills are most critical for me or for my organization? But I hope you've got them. This is what leaders need to do to succeed. So now I come to my last piece. In the world we live in, there's a new challenge, the challenges of leadership, of building human capability, talent, organization, and leadership. Number one, leadership matters. We should be investing in next generation. Second, what's required for leadership succession? We create companies that have alternatives, that have different ways of giving people chances to learn for the position and for diversity, equity, and inclusion, for the women and for the next generation employees. And now we've identified 11 skills of effective leaders. So how do we become and develop better leadership? Either for me, how do I be a better leader, or how do I build better leadership? Here's what we've discovered. To become more effective as a leader, there's 3 things we should be able to manage. 50% is work experience, 30% is education or learning, the training development programs, attending this Human Capital Summit would be an example, or other programs, and 20% is life experience outside of work. Let's talk about each of those. If I'm a leader trying to build the next generation, that could be doing succession planning. It could be as a leader building my successor. Do I help my employees who have potential for the future learn from work experience? Here's some ideas that we've seen you could add to it. Manage a job assignment. Give people a rotation assignment. Allow women and next generation employees, especially in Indonesia, to have new assignments, new opportunities. Allow them to participate in a special project, a task force, or a team. We have a team focused on doing digital implementation. Could you join the team? Coach them. It's wonderful for next generation leaders to have a coach. A coach is somebody who watches you, who sees your behaviors and helps you recognize that your behaviors may need to change for you to reach your goals. Be a mentor. Mentors and coaches can be the same, focused on results and behaviors, but a mentor is more focused on you as a person. I have mentors. When I went to the university decades ago, a professor became my mentor. Now, 40 years later, he's still my mentor, and he still gives me guidance. Make presentations. We get tempted as leaders who are in charge to say, I know how to do that presentation. I'm going to do it. Give the next generation an opportunity for visibility. Let them present. You know, it may not be as good the first round through, but they'll get better. Get them outside to go visit a competitor or a customer. Get them to go make visits to find out what can and should be happening. Be responsible for profit and loss. What can I then do to train people? 30%. Come as a team. Design training to deliver strategy and serve stakeholders. Focus on learning solutions. You can look through it. And I'm going to go the next way. What can I do to help people learn from off-work experience? Encourage learning from personal experience. I learn more about doing performance reviews as a leader from giving my children feedback. If your company does philanthropy, use that for development. Participate in industry positions like joining the Human Capital Summit, volunteer, join media networks. Create an individual development plan for each employee, what they can and should do to be effective. So who's responsible for building leadership? Me. I need to be a better leader. I need to role model my culture, manage my calendar, and create an agenda. And I need to build better leadership. If I'm a leader, I need to build the next generation. If I'm in HR, I need to do succession planning. Whoa, I have covered a lot of material. I hope you will follow me on LinkedIn and find a way to connect with me to get the ideas. Now is a great time in Indonesia. You've got women, you've got next generation leaders entering the workforce. They will be critical to your success. And I hope that I've given you some ideas about why leadership matters, what it looks like in the future, and what we can do to be better leaders and to build better leadership. With that in mind, let me stop and see if there are maybe a few questions that may come through. The timer, just so you follow, it was timing down and I had 10 minutes left, then it went to 0. So I've wrapped up so that we'll have maybe even more time for questions. It went from 10 to 0 all at once.
Dave, thanks so much. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big applause for Professor Dave Ulrich. So some of the important points that I got from your presentation, Dave, the first one is leadership matters. Leadership must be in line with our promise to our customers, but it doesn't stop there because it also should be in line with investors, regulators or communities, partners or parents, employees, and line managers. And Dave also explained about leadership succession starts with 2 things. The first one is requirements of the position, and number 2 is the qualities of the candidate. And he also included DEI, diversity, which is divergent thinking, equity, opportunistic thinking, and inclusion, convergent thinking. And Dave also pointed out that leaders are to empower, not merely show power. There are, big differences between empower and only show power. And what is actually the skill set to make effective leaders? This is my favorite part, Dave, in which you showed us about the leadership code. There are 5 different codes. The first one is human capital developer. It is to empower others to build their brand and also build long-term relationship. The second one is create strategist, shape the future. This is what effective leader needs to do, shape the future, being a strategist, in which he or she should create information asymmetry by separating signal from the noise and also harness uncertainty. Number 3, being an executor. Make things happen, in which you create the right culture, as you mentioned the story about Disney Club or Disneyland in the US, which is so expensive. I agree with you about that. And the next one about executor is providing guidance to improve decision making to deliver. And number 4, a leader must become a talent manager, engage today's talent, in which they must personalize employee-work relationship and also create talent practices. And last but not least, the last code is personal proficiency. Navigate paradox, always learning something new every single day, and take care of yourself. And leaders can be created, ladies and gentlemen, from work experience, which counts 50%, and then education and learning 30%, and life experience 20%. So thank you very much, Dave, for that enlightening lecture. Mata saya terbuka sekali. I felt so enlightened. So I've got a question for you before we jump to...
By the way, I'm a little bit embarrassed. It took me 50 minutes to give a lecture that took you 2 minutes to summarize.
Well,
I should have just done the
what you have
lecture.
just to
I
say.
should have done the lecture in 2 minutes.
But
You did a
thank you,
beautiful job. Thank you.
I watch your videos on YouTube about lectures about leadership and also the future of human capital. And I think this one is one of the best, not because of the material, but the way you present it and the way you give examples that are relevant to Indonesian audience. So thank you very much for that. So I've got a question.
By the way, I was coached to really highlight in Indonesia. Indonesia is a country that is growing. And when you bring women and next generation employees into the workforce, you'll have opportunities as a country that are just exponential. So thank you for allowing me to learn that and to have such respect for you. So I'll respond to your questions.
Right. Optimism is in the air about what you has just said, Dave. So my first question is, okay, we understand that leaders can be created, and you have explained to us about the leadership code, which consists of 5 different codes. But can everyone become a leader with different background, different want and need to learn? Can leaders in this room and participants also harness anyone to become leaders of their own term in the future?
My answer to that is absolutely yes. There is research, and the question you just raised is so nice. Are you born as a leader, or are you bred? Is it nature or is it nurture? And the research is 50-50. Half of what you become as a person is based on your heritage. I showed you the picture of my father. I didn't show you my favorite part of this little book, which is my father asleep. That's now what I look like a lot. So as I get older, I start to look like my father. As you get older, and you're a very young man, as you start to age, you'll start to look more and more like your father. 50% of who we are is what we're born with. It's our nature. I called it a predisposition. I'm predisposed to be an introvert. But the other 50% is what we can learn, nurture, bred. I can learn to be an extrovert. I'm doing that. For those who I've had the privilege of coming to Indonesia a lot with a dear colleague, and I'll do a shout out. He'll be upset with me for doing it, but Suardi Luis is just such a wonderful colleague. I do sessions, and at the end of the session, he says, "Do you want to go to dinner?" And he's so gracious. And my answer is no, because I'm an introvert. But I'm learning to be an extrovert. So the answer to your question is you have a predisposition as an individual, what you're born with. But you can learn and acquire a set of skills that allow anybody to be an effective leader.
Thank you, Dave. So, well, it's, there are some views about who will be the next leaders. Is it better to choose from the inside of the organization or the outside of the organization? Which one do you think better? Should we choose leaders from inside of the organization that, has been really familiar about the business codes, how things are done, or we should take someone from the outside organization to give, a big shake to the status quo?
2 responses. The first, remember I said in succession, you start with the requirements of the position. Is the organization facing dramatic change? If yes, you're more likely to go outside. If the future is much the same as the present, inside. Number 2, when you go outside the organization for a candidate, the candidate should be 30 to 40% more effective or stronger than the internal candidate. If you hire an external candidate who's equal to the internal candidate, those internal candidates may not respect him. But if you hire an external candidate who is significantly more talented, 30 to 40%, the internal candidates say, wow, I get to learn from that new leader. If you go outside, make sure that they have the skills for the future and that they have a unique set of skills.
Right. So before we continue with our question and answer, Dave, I'd like to remind our audience and Bapak Ibu yang ada di ruangan ini. If you'd like to ask questions, please just raise your hand. I will come to your seat. Or for our viewers and participants joining online, please do drop your question to the chat box. We will read your question and discuss it with Dave Ulrich. So Dave, if some candidate coming from outside of the organization, then he will be in a, like a very transition or shocking situation before he or she can unleash his full potential. What is your take? What is your suggestion for those leaders who come outside of the organization can be in line with the current organization he enters?
When he or she, and let's add he and she, because in the future we're going to have both male and female leaders coming in. When he or she comes into the organization, it's really smart for them to begin what they've called in a politician in the United States a listening tour. Listen, listen, learn, learn. Go visit with employees, go visit with customers, go visit with investors. Do a listening tour to find out what you see next that's required. You also, as a leader coming from outside, may ask the men and the women who brought you in, why did you bring me in? I was coaching a woman recently who was from outside, and she said, I'm an outsider. What should I do? And I said, listen. And then I said, go ask the senior business team why they brought you in. What were the skills that you had that made you 30 to 40% better that they felt were critical for the company? So listen, observe, and then I would suggest you start small. Make some early successes. Find a way for people to see that you're trying to help them so that they trust you and build a relationship with you.
Right. Okay, Dave, I've got some additional question regarding the leadership code that you explained earlier. Let's start with strategist, which is shape the future. And in this slide, you also mentioned that by being able to shape the future, you create information asymmetry by separating signal from noise and also harness uncertainty. We are in the times of uncertainty nowadays. What is the right strategy for leaders to make when things are uncertain and we don't see any light at the end of the tunnel yet?
You know, in uncertainty, we often face one of two extremes. We try to tell us it's going to go away. We manage it. We say, when the COVID crisis hit a year and a half ago, one political leader in a country I know well, the United States, said, this will be over by April. This will be over by summer. And we try to make false promises. That's not very good. The other is we get stuck in the uncertainty and we don't do anything. That's why I like the word harness. Harnessing uncertainty means look at the uncertainty as an opportunity. First, tame your apprehensions. Make sure that we run into our fears. What are you uncertain about? What's the worst thing that can happen? What makes you anxious? What makes you lonely? 2, focus on the future. Today's uncertain, but let's anticipate what we could have in the future. 3rd, experiment. Try something. Try something. Uncertainty gives us an opportunity and a license to experiment. Try something. 4th, fail fast and fail forward. If it didn't work, that's okay. Failure is an opportunity to learn. And finally, in harnessing uncertainty, surround yourselves with people who relish change. Don't surround yourselves with people who want to take away uncertainty or who are offended by it. Surround yourself with people who say, this is unclear. Let's try this. Let's see what we can do. And allow yourself to begin to harness that uncertainty in a good way. I have 2 people in my office who I admire. One is Martin Luther King, and the other is Sheikh Zayed. I think Sheikh Zayed in Abu Dhabi, the United Arab Emirates, was one of the great leaders of our time. There was real uncertainty decades ago in the UAE as oil was discovered and what it would mean. He harnessed that uncertainty by giving every Emirati citizen 2 pieces of land, one for a home and one for a business. And it allowed people to move and manage the uncertainty with some experiments and actions that helped them be successful.
Right. So, Dave, I'd like to jump to the last code, which is personal proficiency. So, I just recently read a book about The Miracle Morning. If you have heard the title of the book, The Miracle Morning.
No,
So,
let me write it down.
There are 5 different things that you do first thing in the morning, and the author give an abbreviation of SAVERS, which is self-talk, and then affirmation. Oh, sorry, S is for silence or meditation, and then A for affirmation. V, you can say it's for vision board, or you write something. E is for exercise. and then R is for, this is for writing, but I forgot the term that he put that. So writing something or write your schedule, and another S. This is for, I forgot the exact term, but it's for eat something right or drink something right. As an effective leader, do they have this kind of routine to start their day and to win the day?
I really love it. And I love the idea of self-talk because I think we carry in our mind, it's called scripts or automatic thoughts or mental images. I can't do that. I can't do this. I'm not good enough. I think those savers, silence, affirmation, kind of religion, vision, exercise, write things, start with something, so have a success, maybe the S, a simple success. I think that mindset says my self-talk is changing. They used to talk about in the literature self-defeating behaviors. Whatever I tell myself, I become. If I tell myself I can't do it, I can't. If I tell myself I can, I can. And it sounds like that those idea of a miracle morning, which I really like. Thank you for sharing. Are some wonderful ideas. The only thing I might add, if I were to do the last S, because you didn't put a word on the S, serve someone else. One of the things I've learned about my morning reflections that give me better meaning in my life is I wake up every morning in my affirmation, my meditation, my prayer. I ask myself, who can I serve today? Who can I help today? And I think when we serve others, we begin to get some self-awareness and self-agreement. By the way, sometimes I get a name in my mind and I try to serve them and it didn't work. This morning I woke up and a name came to mind and I called him as I was driving and he said, thank you for calling. I've been really sick. He happened to have contacted last week COVID. And he said, I just needed someone to talk to today. I don't know where that impression came, but that 15-minute conversation with him was one of my miracle mornings. It's not about self-service, it's about other service.
It's about sharing and helping others, and that's what leader needs to do as well, as an effective leader to help others. Saya juga ingin mengingatkan kepada teman-teman, kepada para peserta, Bapak Ibu, apabila Anda ingin bertanya, silakan untuk mengetikkan pertanyaan di kolom pertanyaan, dan bagi Bapak Ibu peserta yang ada di ruangan ini, boleh silakan angkat tangan, nanti kami bantu untuk mungkin translasinya, atau Anda ingin langsung menyampaikannya dalam bahasa Inggris, silakan apabila ingin bertanya dengan Dave Ulrich. Dan saya ingin menegaskan sekali lagi bahwa kita sangat beruntung, IHCS 2021 sangat beruntung untuk kedatangan Dave Ulrich, karena beliau adalah guru dan juga bapak modern HR, modern human capital. I just mentioned that you are the father of modern human capital, so we are so privileged to have you in our session. So Dave, I'd like to jump on to the...
No, I have to correct that. I'm the father of this family.
Who loves Disneyland. Got it.
That's Disneyland. Yeah, okay.
So thank you so much. So I'd like to jump to the uncertain situation we're dealing with, the pandemic. Although we see the light at the end of the tunnel as, we've got a significant number of our population been vaccinated for the second dose, and I believe that most of Americans are vaccinated already by now. Do you think that leaders need to adjust the way they lead while we're going through the pandemic?
When I was making a list of the emerging skills, one of the skills I put up under personal proficiency was navigating paradox. I think coming out of the pandemic, one of the dominant paradoxes is the ability to care for the person, that's on the one hand, and still help your company compete. So there's a feeling of compassion, of caring, of emotion. If I have an employee who's been ill, I care for the employee. I have empathy. I have emotion. I give the employee a good experience. On the other hand, I still have to help my company compete, because if I don't succeed in the marketplace, there is no workplace. And I believe that leaders coming out of this paradox are going to recognize that they need to do both. They need to show care and compassion and have a very personal relationship with their people. Let me give an example. This happens to be a leader. I didn't get her permission, but she's from Asia. she said, I used to lead and a very senior business leader, and I'd see my employees during the day. I'd go by their office, I'd go by their desk, I'd see them at a break, and I'd see how they're doing. In the pandemic, everybody's working at home, and I can't just call them randomly. So she doesn't do what was called managing by wandering around. That's where you see people every day. She does managing by checking in. So for each of her employees every week, she has about a 15-minute phone call on Zoom or whatever technology you have, and it has nothing to do with work. She calls them and says, how are you? How are you feeling? Emotion. How's your life? How's your family? How's your hobbies? How's your children? How's your spouse? Suddenly there's a personal connection. And she said, I do that every week with every employee, managing by checking in. That's caring. That's feeling this compassion, this caring, this concern. And you have to be competitive. Let me tell one other quick example. I was coaching a leader. I posted this on LinkedIn, and some people had problem with a piece of it. It's a big company. I won't name the company, but an employee of this leader's, and he's a very senior leader, an employee made a mistake that cost the company millions of dollars. Now, many people made the mistake, but there was one primary employee. So this leader, this company does much of their work by email. They're a global company. They do a lot of work by email. Had drafted an email to that employee, and it said, you made a mistake. It cost us millions of dollars. You must get better or your job is at risk. Now, I'm the coach of this leader. Remember the line I said, a test of leadership is people leave the interaction with you feeling better about themselves. So I edited the email that he was going to send, but I changed it real quick. Here's what I said. I care about you. You have great potential at this company. You made a mistake. It cost us millions of dollars. You must get better. And my hope is that I can help you improve. Notice, you still are competitive. You made a mistake. You've got to get better. But look at the first two lines. I care about you. You have great potential. The last line is, you're not in trouble if you fail. I am working to help you get better. And he sent that email. Within 24 hours, that employee sent a note back and said, wow, thank you. I appreciate your help. Notice that leader managed both care, compassion. I care about you. I want you to improve. And competitiveness. You made a mistake. You're culpable. You're accountable. I think navigating that tension is really hard. Really hard. But does an employee leave an interaction with you feeling better about him or herself?
Right. But then I would like to continue with, what if the leaders that are put at the highest of an organization tend to show power, flex their muscles instead of empower, like what you said earlier?
Yeah. You know, some leaders do, and they often leaders lead the way they were led. One of the things I've learned, my wife is a very good psychologist. Ooh, I should show a picture of my wife. I can't find it right here. I have my little pictures, but I have a beautiful picture. Oh, here's wife. She would not like me showing this picture. She's not dressed very well. This is beautiful wife with granddaughters in my wife's books.
Wow.
She's a very good psychologist. She writes books.
Are these for your granddaughters?
These are my granddaughters, 4 of them.
Right, 4 granddaughters.
They're beautiful granddaughters. It's lucky they take after their grandmother, not their grandfather, because their grandfather tends to sleep a lot. My wife says, when you see someone difficult parenting, they're parenting in a bad way, that's generally because they were parented that way themselves. So to those leaders who may exercise command and control and power, that's probably how they were led. They can still change. Remember, 50% is what we grew up with, 50% is what we learned. Our job as a leader is to coach those leaders, to say, are you accomplishing what you intended? When you do command and control, notice the leader I was coaching. You made a mistake. It cost us millions of dollars. You must change or you're in trouble. Are you accomplishing what you intended? You want the person who made the mistake to change. That email is not going to help much. Whereas I hope the email that he sent, I care about you. I want you to improve. I think we can improve this. You have great potential. I think he's going to get his goals. So, first point, leaders lead often the way they were led. Second, they can often change. Third, some leaders won't. There's going to be 10 to 20% of leaders who will probably not change. Our job is to work around them, to recognize them for their strengths, their gifts, their abilities, try to put them in a position where they do have good impact, but they may not change. The other ones, I hope we can help them change.
Right.
I hope I've learned some things that my father taught me, and I hope I'm doing some things that my father didn't teach me because he was not perfect, and my children will hopefully also learn. But I think if you live in an organization with a leader who has a more traditional command and control mindset, help him or her see that they're not accomplishing what they want and it's not helping them. And then try to help them change, and they may not be able to. That's another reality that we live with.
Right. Thank you, Dave. So I'd like to give you a context about the profile of our audience. So we've got leaders mostly from state-owned enterprises, or we call it BUMN. But we've got our online audience, which are also leaders, but maybe in a smaller scale. So we've got representatives in cities and also provinces across Indonesia joining us. So it's not only those who are stationed in Jakarta, those who are working in Jakarta, but also leaders in provincial and city level. So we've got leaders of small organization and we've got leaders of huge organization, big organization. Is there any difference between leaders of small and big organization in navigating their organization amid the pandemic?
First of all, let me say to the state-owned enterprises, my father, and I showed the book about him, he built campgrounds. He worked for the government, and he was a government employee for his whole career. He loved his truck, and he would drive his truck every day and build campgrounds. I have deep respect for government leaders. I think the government leaders in a country set a tone for how the rest of the country is run. And we see countries working to build civil service reform where the state-owned enterprises become iconic models of good leadership and management. So my deep appreciation for those who work in state-owned enterprises. It's often more difficult in some ways to make change than private-owned enterprises. Second, small, medium enterprises, your leadership matters more than ever. If you have a company with 50 or 100 or 200 employees or 10 employees, what you do as a leader is what everybody looks at. Quick story, personal story. For 3 years, I quit my job and my wife quit, and we ran a mission for a Christian church in Canada. I was the president. I was in charge of about 200 young people, mostly young men. 1 month, I wanted to really understand what leadership was about with a small organization, 200 people. So I buttoned my coat every day. I didn't say a word, I just buttoned my coat. At the end of the month, everyone had buttoned their coat because they looked at me and saw what I did, and I buttoned my coat. The next month, I unbuttoned my coat every day. And at the end of the month, they unbuttoned their coat. Then I did a day buttoned and a day unbuttoned. By the way, people came to me and said, President, my title, what are you doing? And I was trying to teach them a lesson. Don't look at your leader for silly stuff. Does he or she button their coat or unbutton their coat? Look for your leader for strategy, execution, and guidance. But what I learned in a small, medium enterprise, what you do as a leader is what your people will notice. They will pay attention to you. Be very thoughtful. There's a great line. It's a religious line, but it applies everywhere. We preach the gospel and sometimes use words. I think the loudest teaching we do as leaders is our behavior. And that applies to small, medium enterprises ever more because you see your people every day. It also applies to large state-owned enterprises in communication, in road building, in prisons, in education, in healthcare. We as leaders need to be so aware that what we do talks louder than what we say. And we need to be aware of the unintended consequences of our actions. Right. Let me give a personal example. I've told family stories, and I hope people are okay with that. We used to tell our children to clean their room. And I'm sure, do you have children? I don't know if you have children yet, but clean your room, clean your room, clean your room. When our children became about 10 or 11 years old, and I said to our daughter, clean your room, she looked at me and she said, Dad, your room is a mess. In other words, I was a parent hypocrite. I was asking my children to do something I was not doing. Leadership hypocrisy in any organization won't work. What we do is louder than what we say.
So it applies to any setting of workforce, any setting of
Any
organization,
setting.
small
Any
or
setting.
big. Right. Thank you, Dave. One of the challenges of leading a team amid the pandemic is building that kind of enthusiastic spirit when people are so demotivated, people are stressed out because when you work from home, then works keep flowing in and you cannot manage your time. What is your take and also your input for leaders, especially here in our forum today, to make their employees, to make their subordinates remain enthusiastic, remain passionate about the work?
I think one of the things we can do with our leaders, even in a pandemic, even remember the example I gave of the woman who was the leader who did a check-in, and she did 15-minute check-in. When you bring two thoughts. Number one-on-one time with your people. That could be a 10-minute or a 5-minute check-in. How are you doing? How can I be helpful? The second thought is when you come together as a team, don't just focus on the goals. Here's our objective. Here's the goal. Here's how we're doing. Let's start with a good news moment. Who has a good news? One of the things I love to do, and I'm not able to do it because there's so many people, when I get to peek into people's offices, I love to look at what's on their shelf. Dave, tell me the story of Martin Luther King, of Sheikh Zayed, of your father hauling food, of your daughter's wedding. I think we need to get to know people at a personal level. I have over my this shoulder, I have a bike. I did bike riding when I was younger. We used to do bike rides with people. Get to know people, even in a setting that's public. And I see companies doing that, using technology to gain experience. So one-on-one, try to have an emotion, an empathy, a time to share. And one-on-many, don't just focus on the work. And I think the third thing is encourage our employees once in a while when they're at home to disconnect. Remember my 11th goal, take care of yourself so that you can take care of others. Physically, socially, emotionally, intellectually, spiritually. This is very close to your miracle morning. The silence, affirmation, vision, exercise, right, and the final S, or service. I think we as leaders need to encourage our employees to take care of themselves. Those would be some very quick thoughts.
Thank you, Dave. So it's really important to apply that miracle morning routine.
So you've asked me, I'm going to ask you a question. You know
Sure.
Indonesia. You
Yeah.
live in Indonesia. You love Indonesia. What makes you optimistic about leaders in Indonesia in the future? What makes you optimistic about Indonesian leaders? By the
It
way,
would-
this was not scripted, but I love to ask you a question.
You know what?
because
It would be
Indonesia.
politically subjective, but nowadays we live under the presidency of our President Joko Widodo. He's a very good man because I knew him since he was a mayor in Solo City. Solo is a small city in Central Java. From the leadership that he showed back in Solo, he was really, really aggressive when it comes to economic development, how to encourage people, and how to one of the principles that I remembered from President Joko Widodo back then in Solo was Solo future is Solo in the past. So that's the strong concept that he adopted. So the future is actually the past. By that, he was trying to maintain the heritage. Solo is a heritage city. Batik is actually originally from Solo. And that is the concept that President had when he was a mayor. And now in Jakarta as the president, he is unstoppable. When it comes to building infrastructure, Indonesia has transformed into a much better state. We are a member of G20 and all that achievements. And now we can say that we are proud as Indonesians because we are very optimistic. By 2045, we will reach our 100th year of independence. And by then, we are very ambitious in transforming our nation into a better state, advanced country. So that is a glance about the optimism that we have now under the current president.
Nice. What I love about that is the power of state-owned enterprises and political leaders to make a difference. We have every country has their heritage of great political leaders. And by the way, other countries have leaders who were not so good politically.
Yeah.
When you have a very good political leader, he or she can begin to raise the expectations of the entire citizenship and make the country stronger. You see that in Singapore with their founder leader. You see that in other countries. So what great optimism. I hope that optimism is not just something at the government level, but it's pervasive at every level of at every level of society
Dave,
throughout Singapore.
The reason why I say this has nothing to do with me getting credit from the leaders that are in front of me, but I can say that by listen and then giving service and then doing public service, how to improve himself as an individual, I can see that our current president is actually the leaders that you explained before that makes an effective leader. So I can relate to him right now. So yeah,
the theme of this
also the
summit
principle
is
of that leadership code. I can see from him.
The theme of that summit is rethink, reimagine, reinvent. And I think that those messages are what leadership will be about. By the way, I love putting the leadership code against your president. Does he have a strategy for the future? Does he execute and get things done? Does he care for people today? Does he build the future generation? And does he have personal proficiency?
Yeah.
And what that code does is it helps me understand why he's so successful so that we can transfer that success to the next generation.
Right. Thank you, anyway, for the question for me. Hopefully it really answers your question. But I've got some questions from our audience. It's coming from Rizky from Banten. The question is, how do I build my leadership skills? And also, how do I build my leadership ability to make a young leader in Indonesia or to make a team?
I laid out 3 ways to build next generation leaders. One is build by experience. So my advice to you as a young leader, if you were a young leader, get experience, take on an assignment that you may not have an easy answer to. I assume that any leader in this room, I could go back into your early period and you had an assignment for which you were not fully qualified. Take on an assignment, stretch, get outside your comfort zone. Second, be willing to learn. That means learn from things like this Human Capital Summit, other training events, reading books, etc. And third, don't just learn at work. Learn about leadership in your family life. I've given a lot of family examples today. Learn about leadership in your church, in your religious community. Learn about leadership in your political community. So, work experience, take on assignments, do difficult things, training and development experiences, make sure you stretch yourself, new training, new development, and 3 life experiences that allow you to learn outside of your comfort zone. If I were coaching you as a young leader, I'd say, do those 3 things. And let me go back. I should have started with this. The first question I would ask a young leader or a more mature leader, what do you want? What do you want? Why do you want to be a leader? What is it about leadership that excites you? What is it you hope to gain from being a more effective leader? And then I tell you the 3 ways to begin to build leadership.
Right. So this is so thank you for the answer. And this is the second question of the same person. What do you think about the future of human capital in Indonesia and what to do to maximize the potentials? I think you touch on about the diversity of Indonesia and how we are optimistic about our future. But to give you a brief of context as well, that actually Indonesia nowadays is the capital of digital economy in Southeast Asia. So we are the largest, and we've got some decacrons, some unicorns, and we are really, work hard to achieve and maintain that position. So what do you think about the future of human capital in Indonesia, knowing about our current situation now, Dave?
Let me just be really honest. I don't know Indonesia. I'm not an expert on Indonesia, and if I were to give you an expertise on Indonesia, it would probably be uninformed. I have been to Indonesia a dozen times with Suwardi Lewis and others. Each time I leave Indonesia, I leave with the sense of optimism you just described. Every emerging market and growth market has good and bad, and every old market has good and bad. I would be optimistic about, I think, more women in the workforce is a plus. And I think the demographic boom that I shared says we're going to have a high labor opportunity. I did not know as much about your digital centrality. I think the world is going to be increasingly digital, where we don't worry about where we work and place as much about the technology that connects us, like this experience. But I'm not an expert on Indonesia. There are people there who will talk to you at this Human Capital Summit who would have much better insights on Indonesia than me. I tend to be optimistic about most countries. I've been in some countries where I'm less optimistic, where the leadership seems a little more command and control. And I won't tell stories about other countries.
Right.
That would be inappropriate, but I'm not an expert on Indonesia.
Then let me ask you a relevant question about America now. With the new leadership of Biden, from Trump, I went to America for covering the inauguration of Trump back then in 2017, if I'm not mistaken. I was a journalist, and New York and several blue states were really gloomy, knowing that Trump won the election, and now it's Biden, back to Democrat. Does Biden have what it takes to be an effective leader, in your opinion?
I've got enough judgment, because we may be recording this, to not become. I try not to look at the politics. I try to look at the individual, and almost every leader I've seen has strengths and weaknesses. Let me ask those listening the question: how well does Biden and his team set a strategy for the future? How well do they get things done? How well do they accomplish the things that need to happen? How well do they manage their people today? How well do they give confidence to the citizens? How well are they investing in human capital for the future? And do they have authenticity? Do they have integrity, character that people trust? By the way, everybody would have their own answers to those 5 questions. My answer is no more viable than yours, but I think that's the value of the framework. Does Biden and his team, or did Trump and his team, have a strategy for the future? Did they execute against it? Did they make it happen? Did they manage people with respect and dignity and care? Did they invest in the next generation? And did they have character and integrity at personal proficiency? So those questions allow me to get a sense of where somebody comes out. The one issue I will say very aggressively, and everybody says it, political divisiveness is not healthy. It's okay to disagree. I think disagreement is wonderful. I've had people I disagree with who are my best friends. But I think we in America have not yet mastered, how do we disagree without being disagreeable? How do we have a tension without contention? How can we get together in a room and say, you believe ABC, I believe XYZ, let's find a common ground at P, Q, and R. I think in America, we're struggling with that. Biden advocated for unity in his inaugural address, but we're not seeing it happen as much as most of us would like.
Right.
I hope in Indonesia that you have disagreements. I think there is power in diversity. Divergent thinking is powerful, but there's also got to be convergent thinking and unity that brings us together. And I think in America we've seen that under other presidents better. Obama did it better. Clinton did it better. Reagan did it better. Both political parties had leaders who managed that. Right now, as a country, we're not doing very well on that.
All right. Let's move on to the next question. We've got a questioner named Ahmad Rijal. So, hello, Dave. Thank you for the presentation. It was a very insightful one. Talking about succession plans, what is the most effective way to find the most talented employees to be a leader in an organization? And should all leaders have human capital competency?
The first one is the best source of future talent is looking at the next generation of employees and giving them opportunity to learn and to grow. And remember, when I talked about succession, don't start with the candidate. Start with the requirements of the position. What will this job require technically and socially in the future? And then begin to look at candidates. And one of the first questions you asked was, Do we look inside or outside? Do our internal candidates have the skills for what's the future? Or if you go outside, are they 30 to 40% better? And as you begin to do that, you'll begin to identify a pool of candidates that you can hopefully choose from who will help you compete and be successful with what's next. As an employee, I hope I develop a breadth of skills so that I'm ready for whatever that future opportunity might bring. Don't just do what I've always done. Push myself to learn new skills and new opportunity.
So requirement of the position comes first when it comes to leadership succession, according to Dave. So we've got another 20 minutes now, and we still have many questions coming in. I'd like to read a question from, this one comes from Pertamina. Pertamina is our oil producer, state-owned oil producer. Adia Husni. So I've learned about your HR model, the famous Dave Ulrich HR model. Considering the advancement of today's information technology and many disruptions that had already happened, how should we focus our effort for years ahead? I mean, we know that all of the aspects should be navigated well, but is there any suggestion for us where we should focus on? Thank you. Please, Dave.
Thank you. I laugh when you say the famous Dave Ulrich model. I always wonder, what is that? But I did work a number of years ago about how do you organize and structure an HR department. And we talk about the organization design of HR. You have centers of expertise that have deep specialty. You have embedded HR people, often called business partners, and you have service centers that are technology enabled. Learning for those pieces to work together, often called the three-legged stool, specialists and centers of expertise, embedded HR people, generalists, and shared services through technology becomes what makes an effective HR department. In the last 20 years, we've learned a number of things, and we've evolved that idea. We just did some research, and here's what we found. The structure of the HR department, centers of expertise, embedded HR, service centers, is less important than two things. One, the overall identity of the HR department. What is it we as an HR department are trying to deliver to the company? That matters more than the structure. Are we trying to help the company compete in the marketplace? Are we trying to deliver talent, organization, leadership? What's the identity? Are we partners? Are we enablers? HR departments that have a clear vision and identity tend to be more successful regardless of the structure. The second thing we found that was actually more important is the relationships. Many who transform HR want to get the roles right. Specialists and centers of expertise working with generalists embedded in the business. How do we define our role clarity? We often do an exercise called RACI, R-A-C-I, responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. Guess what we've learned? The relationship matters more than the role. My wife and I showed a picture of my good wife. There's the other picture I was trying to find. That's beautiful. My good wife. I hope you're taping this so that I can share that with her. My good wife. We've been married 45 years. That's a long time. Not once have we sat down formally on a Sunday night, our weekend is Saturday and Sunday, and said, what are the jobs this week? We have to buy food, we have to cook, we have to clean house, we have to pay bills, we have to take children. Who's responsible? Who's accountable? Who's consulted? Who's informed? We've never filled out a grid. We have a relationship.
Right.
This week, I'm really busy. I think this is the week of HR conferences around the world. Everyone in Europe and Latin America and Asia is having an HR conference, so I'm pretty busy. This week, my wife's fixing food. She's doing laundry. Next week, she's very busy. So I'm going to shop. I'm going to fix food. I'm going to do laundry because we have a relationship that works. I beg you in HR, in a state-owned enterprise like the oil company, get your roles clear, but make sure you have a clear purpose. Why do we in HR exist? and make sure that you have great relationships of how we work with each other.
Right. So we still have 5 minutes left, Dave. Before we say goodbye to you, can you please give us your final take about how leaders should navigate their organization amid these uncertain times during the pandemic? What would your suggestion be to Indonesian leaders now?
You know, to Indonesian leaders in big companies, state-owned enterprises, small companies, top of the company, bottom of the company, wherever you are. If I were coaching you, sitting with you knee to knee, these are the 4 questions I would ask you as a leader to help you navigate in uncertain times. Question 1, what do you want? What do you want? If you don't know what you want as a leader, somebody will define it for you, probably not in your interest. Be clear about what you want. And it's not just about you, but what do you want? What makes you, how do you define success? What are your strengths, your passions, your interests? Number 2, by the way, what you want is so critical. And sometimes it's work related, sometimes it's not work related. As a leader, make sure you manage that paradox of work and non-work. What do I want? How do I define my success? Number 2, who do I serve? When you talked about Miracle Morning, my final S was service. Who am I helping as a leader? Because of my leadership, how am I empowering someone else? What do I want? Who do I serve? Number 3, how do I build? How do I build? Am I creating an organization that's stronger than me? Am I creating a culture that's the right culture, like Disney World? Am I creating a team? Am I creating a system that will outlive me? Leadership is not about me. It's about what we create collectively. So if I were coaching you, what do I want? What do you want? Who do you serve? How do you build? And number 4, where am I on my journey? There's a religious episode, and I've used a few religious episodes that apply to almost any religion. It's Muslim, it's Christianity, it's even Hindu would appreciate the story. It's the story of the creation, Adam and Eve. They're in the garden, and it's a wonderful story wherever you come from. They make a mistake. And the gods come down and say, Adam, where are you? For years, I thought the gods were asking, where are you physically? Are you hiding behind a tree? Are you hiding behind a bush? But that's a silly question, because God can see behind a tree and behind a bush. I think the question, where am I, is a rhetorical question. Where am I on my journey of leadership? What I love about the Adam and Eve story, that's a classic. When I fail, how do I respond? Adam and Eve made a mistake. They failed. The gods ask them, where are you on your journey? Are you going to continue or are you going to give up? I find those 4 questions helpful, and they're my final 4 questions. They're my coaching questions. What do I want? What do you want? Who do you serve? How do you build? And where are you on your journey? With those questions, I believe the best is yet ahead. The best is always yet ahead, because I know what I want. I know who I'll take with me, who I'll serve. I know how I'm going to build. And ultimately, I know where I am on that journey, and I will continue to recover to make progress.
I cannot let you go yet because I've got several questions left about these 4 principles, which I find so enlightening and so eye-opening. What do you want? Who am I helping right now as a leader? How do I build? And where am I in the journey? About who can I help? A leader tends to have an ego, tend to have the power syndrome. How to shift that mindset that we are the servant of the public, that we are the servant of the people, and we serve other people as a leader, Dave?
I'm going to go back to the book you've told me I should buy, Miracle Morning. Silence, affirmation, vision, exercise, right? And the S for me is service. I hope as a leader, you wake up in the morning and you have a vision, you have a goal. But I hope in your mind, in whatever reflection time you do, who can I serve today? Who can I help today? How do I use my power to empower somebody else? Someday you may not have an answer, and someday you may have an answer that didn't help. Today I called somebody. I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow, but actually sometimes they're minor acts, sometimes they're major acts. But I hope we as leaders can use our power to empower the next generation, especially the women and the next generation in these state-owned enterprises who will help create an Indonesia that is literally one of the tiger companies in the G20. That's the hope. What do I want? Who do I serve? That's a key. How do I build and where am I? I find those 4 questions helping me as I try to be more effective and hopefully helping others as they try to be more effective.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big applause for Professor Dave Ulrich. Thank you very much, sir, for your enlightening presentation, and we got a lot from your lecture today. So thank you very much. Please stay safe, and please send our hi to your family and friends. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you.